For any variable quantity, we can define a new quantity that measures changes in the value of the original quantity. So, if we have a variable x that represents the value of a quantity, then delta x represents some change in that quantity's value. If we have a variable w that represents the value of another quantity, then delta w represents some change in that quantity's value. When describing changes, positive numbers indicate that the quantity's value increased. Negative numbers indicate that the quantity's value decreased. If we keep track of how to represent a change algebraically, it will help us avoid messing up the sign of the change. Anytime we track a change in some varying quantity's value, the value begins with some measurement and ends with another measurement. The change is the difference between these values. That is, if x represents the value of some varying quantity, and x changes from some initial or starting value x sub I to some final or ending value x sub f, then delta x equals x sub f minus x sub I. So if x changes from 7 to 19, then delta x equals x sub f minus x sub I, so delta x equals 19 minus 7, which equals 12. Take a moment to see if this value makes sense. X started at 7 and changed to 19, so the value of x increased, and this change is represented by a positive value for delta x. If x changes from x equals 5 to x equals negative 3, then delta x equals x sub f minus x sub I, so delta x equals negative 3 minus 5, which equals negative 8. X started at 5 and changed to negative 3, so the value of x decreased, and this change is represented by a negative value for delta x. Now, let's choose some reference value for x, like x equals 3. Then, let x change to any possible value. The expression x minus 3 represents the change in x away from 3. In other words, delta x equals x minus 3. Therefore, we can also think about changes in quantities as varying quantities in their own right. Thinking about changes in quantities, how might we interpret the expression x minus negative 4? For any value of x, x minus negative 4 represents the change in x away from negative 4. We can see that this makes sense by choosing a value for x and evaluating. Let x equals 3. Then delta x equals x minus negative 4, so delta x equals 3 minus negative 4, and so delta x equals 3 plus 4, which equals 7. A change in x from negative 4 to 3 is an increase of 7, so delta x equals 7.